So for this project, I'm going to be taking the Bernat Velvet yarn. This yarn I just discovered. I'm pretty sure it's new, but it's so beautiful. It's like the softest yarn I've ever felt in my entire life. And if you don't use this, just use a bulky or a weight 5 yarn. And I am going to be using a 6mm crochet hook. So to get started with this project, I'm going to be making my slip knot and then chaining. So I have chained a total of 52. So to get started on the pattern for this blanket, I am going to be doing what's called cluster stitches. So I'm going to count over to the 4th chain from the hook. It's a little bit difficult with this velvet yarn, but just do your best. So I'm just going to yarn over, put my hook through that 4th chain. Then yarn over, pull through. Then again, I'm going to yarn over, go through that same exact chain that I just placed my hook, yarn over, pull through. Then one more time, yarn over, go through that same chain, yarn over, pull through. So I'll have a cluster of loops on my hook. I'm just going to yarn over and pull through all of them. Then I'm going to chain 1, skip the very next chain in the row, placing my hook through the chain after it. But I'm going to continue that cluster stitch. So I'm skipping that very next chain, yarn over, go through the chain after it, yarn over, pull through. So a cluster stitch is pulling yarn through 3 times. So here's the 2nd time, and the 3rd time. Then I'm going to yarn over, pull through all of those. So that is what a cluster stitch is. I'm just going to continue this for the rest of this row. So after each cluster stitch, always chain 1, skip the very next stitch of the row, and go through the chain after with a cluster stitch. So that is all you're going to be doing. I'm just going to place a cluster stitch in every other chain until I reach the end of this row. So now I've finished the entire row, doing a cluster stitch in every other chain, chaining 1 in between each cluster stitch. So I'm at the very end. I just finished with the last cluster. To get started on row 2, I'm just going to chain 2, flip over the work, and then I'm going to be placing a cluster stitch in the chain 1 space. So yarn over, go through the chain 1 space, bring up a loop. Yarn over, same space, bring up the 2nd loop. Yarn over, same space, bring up the 3rd loop. And then yarn over, pull through all of the loops on your hook. So then just chain 1, skip over that cluster beneath it and go through the very next chain 1 space with a cluster stitch. Then chain 1 and continue that pattern of placing a cluster stitch in the chain 1 spaces for this entire row. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this row and come back when I'm finished. So I just want to show you guys, I am almost at the end of my row. As you can see, this is what the blanket is going to be looking like. It does have a little bit of space in between the clusters. It's going to just be a lightweight blanket, but still very soft and very warm. So I just want to show you the very last chain. So I placed my cluster in the second to last chain. You will have that chain 2, so you are going to be placing your last cluster through that chain 2, so just make sure you're not skipping the last cluster of the row. So yeah, that's it. So then to get started on row 3, you're going to continue the same way by chaining 2, flipping over the work, placing your first cluster in that chain 1 space. So basically you're just going to be repeating this pattern for the entire baby blanket. I'm just gonna do this. You can do as many rows or as little rows as you would like. I'll let you know how many rows I end up doing for mine, but basically that is all you're going to be doing. So I'm gonna do the bulk of the work and come back and show you how to do the edging. But yeah, this tutorial is pretty straightforward. It's very easy, very beginner friendly, but it has a really unique and beautiful look to it. And it doesn't look beginner, but definitely is. It's a very easy pattern to do. So yeah, I'm just gonna finish the bulk of this work and let you know how many rows I end up doing. So I finished doing the length of the work. I've done a total of 44 rows. And as you can see, it works up so beautifully, and this velvet yarn is honestly so amazing. So now I'm just gonna be doing edging. This is kind of a small blanket, but I'm gonna be adding a few rows of edging along the side just to make it a little bit thicker. So to begin on the edging, I have left off on the last cluster stitch of the row. I haven't chained anything yet. I'm just gonna go ahead and chain 1 to bring up the yarn. Then I'm gonna flip the work and be going right back down the row, and then I'm gonna be making my way around. So to begin on the edging, I have just chained 1. I'm going to go to that first chain 1 space, skipping over the cluster, place my hook through that, yarn over, pull through, have 2 left on my hook. I'm going to yarn over, pull through those 2 loops. Then I'm going to go right back into that same space, placing 1 more single crochet. So you will have a total of 2 single crochets going through that chain 1 space. I'm going to skip over to the next chain 1 space of the row, ignoring the cluster, and I'm going to be placing 2 single crochet. So you're just going to go down this row, skipping to each chain 1 space, placing 2 single crochet in those chain 1 spaces. You're not chaining anything in between these 2 single crochets, you're just skipping straight over. So I'm just going to work my way down to the end of the row, and I'll come back and show you how to do the turn. So now I've made my way to the end of the row. I just have that last chain left, so this is the chain 2 of the turn for the row beneath it. I'm just going to place my hook through that, the top of that chain 2, and I'm going to be placing a total of 4 single crochets through this chain. So now you have 4 single crochets that will make the turn for you. And now I'm going to be working into the other side of the blanket. So these rows are not as definitive because it's the side, but as you can see, there's going to be the top of the cluster and the bottom of the cluster. I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but the clusters are on the very corners. So you're going to just be continuing that. Since this is the end of the turn, I'm just going to place my hook through that top of the first cluster, placing 1 single crochet. Then I'm going to skip over to the bottom of the cluster, placing again just back to the regular 2 single crochets per space. Then just skip over to the next bottom of the cluster, placing 2 single crochets in that same space. So this is how I'm going to be working the side of the piece. So just go ahead and make your way down, continuing to place 2 single crochets in each kind of chain 1 space, but this is the bottom of the cluster. So I will come back once I reach the end of this row. So I've made my way to the end of this row. So I do have one more chain left of the row before I reach the very corner. So just like we did at the top, this very last chain is only going to get 1 single crochet through it instead of 2. So, and then I'm going to go into that very corner chain, placing a total of 4 single crochets in this chain to make the turn. Now I am back to the other side. I'm just going to continue placing 2 single crochets per space, and then once I reach the end, I'm going to do another 4 single crochets in this space to make the turn. On that very first space on the other side, just 1 single crochet, and then go back to placing 2 single crochets on the top and the bottom of each cluster. So I'm just going to go all the way around and finish off this first row of edging, and I will come back once I'm finished. Now I've reached the end of the row. I am back to the beginning of the edging, so I have placed 1 single crochet in that very last chain of this row. And so to connect that, all I'm going to do is place my hook through that very first chain, yarn over, pull through, and then continue that pulling through the loop on your hook. That will slip stitch it together, closing off the row. To begin on round 2, it's going to begin right off this corner, so I'm just going to chain 1, and I'm going to go into that very first chain that's connected to the chain 1, placing a single crochet. In that very next chain, I'm going to be placing 2 single crochets through that chain to help make the turn, and then I am back to the other side. So now I'm just going to work 1 single crochet in each chain until I make it to the other turn, where I am going to increase a little bit to take the turn. So in that first chain of the turn, I'm going to be placing 2 single crochet. The second chain of the turn, I'm going to be placing 2 single crochet, and then just making my way across as normal, 1 single crochet per chain. So just to show you, I have reached the corner, so I placed the last single crochet of the row. There is 2 single crochets turning the corner, and then it straightens out again. So in that first single crochet that turns the corner, I'm going to be placing 2 single crochet through that chain. In the very next single crochet, I'm going to also be placing 2 single crochet through that chain. And then I will have made my way back to the straightaway. I'm going to be continuing this pattern to place 1 single crochet in every chain, and on the corner of every turn in those 2 single crochets, placing 2 single crochets through each of them. So I'm just going to finish the second row of edging. So now I'm back to the beginning of the second row. I'm just going to attach it the same way on that very first chain, the chain 1 that I used to pull up the work to start the row. I'm going to place a slip stitch. So placing my hook through that stitch, just yarn over, pull through, and then continue that same loop, pulling through the second loop on your hook to close off the row. So to finish off this blanket, all I'm going to be doing is chaining 1 and doing 2 more rows of the, basically repeating the last row that I did. So I'm just going to continue this blanket off using single crochets. I just like the idea of having a thick border around kind of more of like a loose meshy blanket. So I'm going to be doing 2 more rows of exactly what I just did, and then I'm basically done with the blanket. Super easy, super simple. It's very beginner friendly, but it looks very nice. So I love the design of this. It is a little bit on the smaller side. You're welcome to make the edging bigger or make the number of rows bigger, but I just think this is the perfect size for like an infant in a car seat or a stroller. It just is perfect and very soft and warm. So I'm just gonna go ahead and finish those 2 rows, and then I am done with the project. So if you guys have any more suggestions for crochet tutorials or any other kind of videos you'd like to see, please leave them in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.